If you're ready for freedom from the grind, then passive income from real estate investing is the best way to get you there. If you don't know where to start or what to do next, then the Rent Roll Radio Show is the best place to get you there. Join us while we discuss the best practices, strategies, and mindset you'll need and give you actionable content to get you from where you are to where you want to be.
Hey, Rent Roll Radio listeners, I am not your host as always. I'm Cole McKnight filling in for Sterling Chapman. And here with us today, we have Taylor Loht. This is actually his second time appearing on the show. So Taylor, welcome. Good to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me on the show again.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started into real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a multifamily and self-storage investor, investing all across the country. Started my real estate journey back in 2016. Since then, I've acquired, partnered on, invested in, or had a hand in over 250 million in commercial real estate investments. Today, like I said, we're investing all around the country, mostly multifamily, a little bit of self-storage investing though as well. And, always looking for solid, value add investment opportunities that make sense in today's high interest rate environment. We just hit a kind of a milestone in terms of interest rates being the highest that they've been in the last 22 years, which is impacting all the markets, I think, in many ways. And as real estate investors, we're certainly not immune from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what markets are you actively targeting right now to find deals in?
So, yeah, we're investing in Dallas, Houston. We've done quite a lot in Phoenix, although that has slowed down this year, just I think due to some, market conditions in Phoenix, of course, that folks are generally aware of. I still like Florida as a state for investing, but changes in not only property taxes, but also increases in insurance rates have made deals a lot more difficult in Florida. Now, Texas is not immune from that, but it seems the impact on the investment market generally has been a little bit more significant in Florida. I also like the Carolinas, both North and South Carolina. In the more major markets, of course, they both can get pretty rural and you don't want to get too far out of the major cities. And then we've had success in certain parts of the Midwest, if you will. Mid-Michigan's been good to us in other areas, but, always focusing on sound economic fundamentals is really where it starts. Supply and demand related issues. Are there strong job markets? Are there people moving to these areas? Do they have diverse economies in that the local economy is not dominated by one industry or one major employer? Looking for those big potential risk factors, but also those big opportunities where we can ride the economic tide, if you will.
Absolutely. So I think after COVID, we've seen a shift toward the Arizona and the Texas and the Floridas and the Carolinas. So did you see that with Michigan as well? Or what attracted you toward the Midwest markets?
I think one of the big things about the Midwest is, as much as I love Texas as an investor, and I'm certainly still investing there are other investors, a lot more other investors in Texas. Whereas, who in the world is talking about, say, like Michigan, or there are some folks that are in, say, Indiana. I don't invest in Indiana myself, but, Indianapolis is one of those cities that does get some attention from investors. But if you go to, say, a real estate syndication conference, the odds that somebody's going to mention Indianapolis is pretty low, right? And I think that could be a good thing. Now, like I said, I don't invest in Indianapolis. Just throwing that market out there as a general Midwest market that most people are familiar with, that has people that live there. That could make sense to go and evaluate the local economy to see, if it fits the supply and demand drivers, if you will. Just as an example of a city that we might look at in the Midwest as topic of consideration, that is not an area that investors are really broadly talking about. Certainly some people are, but again, if you go to a real estate investing conference, the odds that you're going to hear that market as compared to, say, Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, Phoenix, all these other areas, it's pretty low, right? You're going to hear about those Texas markets first.
Sure. Okay. So what are some conferences you've attended recently?
Recently, honestly, I really slowed down my conference attendance over the last few years because I found that investing that time, effort, and money back into my own business has a much greater return than most conferences. Although I'll say I go to the best ever conference every year. It has shifted from Denver to Salt Lake City. Went this year, had a great time. Certainly going back next year. Others that I've been to that have been good, but I don't go to consistently. Like I started with the Real Estate Guys, Secrets of Successful Syndication. Before I'd ever syndicated a deal or invested in a syndication, that's where I started to go. And those events were productive. I've had good experiences at RE Mentors Ultimate Partnering events, although it's been a few years since I've been to one of those. I'd certainly be open to going back in the future. Other folks like going to, say, Michael Blanc's events. I had been to one of those a few years ago.
2 months ago, Dealmaker Live in Dallas. And it was awesome. It was a great time connecting with people and just seeing what everybody was up to and meeting new faces and then just making some connections.
Yeah. So the big thing that when I was first starting out, didn't appreciate about those events was how important the lobby is, if you will, how critical and valuable it is to just not even go in the actual session, just stand in the lobby and talk to people, make friends, network, or heck, talk with people that you've met before, online or on a podcast or on a forum like Bigger Pockets, and just, build a face-to-face relationship. And certainly not all of those connections ever lead to anything. I would say a small minority of those connections lead to, say, deals or investors or anything. But those a couple percent that do lead to, productive relationships and profits and everything can be incredibly valuable. When you're starting out, speaking about the sessions and sitting in on them, the sessions can be valuable. The education, sitting in the speaking event, if you will, and trying to take notes and learn something, that can be valuable, but kind of after you've done a few, especially after you've syndicated a deal, exactly, you've heard them all. You're probably not really getting any new ideas. The real value is in networking.
Right. So I think some of the sessions, it's not so much that they're either pitchy or not pitchy, but it's, hey, hoorah, go you can do this. We really believe in you. Everybody, let's clap for 10 seconds. And it's more like, if I'm going there, I want very specific, detailed education pieces that I don't know about, whether that's how to invest when the interest rates are at 9%, or what type of cap rate I need to look for this type of multifamily apartment complex, or even a storage unit. What size lot should I be looking for? Like really the finer details. And sometimes I just feel as if they're more like very broad and general ideas that I could get from listening to a motivational speech on Spotify or Apple or whatever.
I totally agree. And there are a few factors that go into that. So one, just speaking from the speaker's perspective, I've done a few of these myself. So, I feel I have a little bit of insight into what it takes to give a presentation on a stage like that. One, it's difficult to plan a speech like that and make it productive, meaning it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to put one of those presentations together. So when you put a presentation like that together, you want to make it so that you can kind of probably give that presentation for at least a few years. It's going to be somewhat evergreen content rather than a flash in the pan. What's the strategy I'm pursuing in Q3 of 2023? Well, that has a very finite length. And if I'm going to invest all that time and effort into generating a presentation, I'm going to give something that I can present on today, next year, 2 years from now, yeah, I might refine the presentation a little bit, change some of the details, but I want to provide knowledge that is a little rinse and repeat. And that's a little bit for my convenience, but it's just the reality. And a lot of speakers do that. Another
Hmm.
factor is when you're up on a stage speaking, it's a completely different experience in terms of the knowledge that you're sharing, but also how comfortable you are really getting into the weeds. And you could look at that from a, potential liability standpoint. There's a lot of different ways that you could put that, but there's just a big incentive to be a little bit more generic. Whereas the same folks that are up on stage, they go out into the lobby too. And if you grab them one-on-one, heck, watch their presentation, ask them a question about it, be friendly, whatever. But if you want to get the real thing, like one of the examples that you gave, what's the cap rate you're investing in today, or, or you're targeting today, rather, or the strategy that you're pursuing, it to kind of go back to what I'd spoken about a little bit ago. What are you doing in Q3 of 2023? Just as an example, we'll go talk to them face to face, and the odds that they're willing to tell you face to face are, it's not 100%. They might not tell you, but they'll share a lot more one on one because they're not on a stage, right? There's a lot more pressure on a stage just to be, accurate. When you're blasting it out to everybody, it's hard to have nuance in what you're saying. And then you could also talk about, potential liability or whatever, it's theoretical. And I think the SEC has a few things to say about, say, like conditioning the market. And, it just gets a lot more into the weeds. Whereas when
Oh
you're
yeah.
one-on-one, it's not recorded, it's not a public conversation, people will really share.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, that's a very good point, and that adds a lot of good context to conference goers, or even myself, when I don't necessarily, if I'm sitting there in the audience, I'm not necessarily thinking like that, but then honing it in here. That's awesome. So, do you do any local meetups? Do you attend any local meetups? Do you host any?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, I hosted a local meetup that was productive, grew quite a bit, and then once COVID came around, I took it online, and there are both advantages and disadvantages to that, right? Of course, the in-person connection is very valuable, right? It makes a lot of sense, but the disadvantage is that my reach is limited to just the people that are in my city. Whereas when we go online, I can bring in people from all over the world to that event. Now, we just mostly have folks from the US that tune in to our now online webinars, but that's been, very helpful. I do attend a few local meetups here in my area, although, honestly, most of them, like most RIAs, are just not a good use of my time, right? They're giving a presentation on, how to wholesale your first property, how to invest in real estate with no money down, right? That's not relevant content to me at all, but it's
Hmm.
also it's not my crowd, right? My investors are mostly, millionaires to multimillionaires. They're not sitting in that crowd. Their time is way too valuable. Those are the folks that I'm looking to, spend time with and build relationships with.
Sure, sure. So, how do you find those investors?
So I have quite a few strategies, but for me, the most productive by far has been through my podcast and just putting out content, putting out knowledge, sharing, interviews with, exactly like what we're doing today, but just on my show. And yeah, I think there are a few reasons that that's productive and useful. People get to know you by listening to you, or get to know me by listening to me, get to appreciate our experiences and knowledge and everything around that, and build a certain level of comfort. And then once they reach that point, they say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to Taylor and learn about, the deals that he's doing." Now, I don't speak about our deals in the show for obvious compliance reasons to anybody who's been in the business before, but they generally build a relationship, with me or with you generally when you speak on a podcast or host a podcast. And that really boils down to, I'm reading this book right now that was written in, I think, probably the early 80s by Thomas Stanley. It's called Selling to the Affluent. It is a thick book. I got it on Amazon. And one of the lessons that he's hammering home in the portion where I am right now is that people don't buy your product. They don't buy your investment. They buy you, right? That is what, quote unquote, sells them on whatever you're talking about, right? Whether it's an investment opportunity or something, a business service, something like that. They're buying you. Yeah, they are interested in what the thing, widget, service investment is, but first it comes down to you, your experience, knowledge, everything around that.
They have to believe in you and trust in you and want to actually spend time with you and communicate and talk with you. And if you've just got, an abrasive personality, but you're a great businessman, they probably don't want to talk to you. But yeah, we see a lot of that. So we get with Crestworth Capital, we get a lot of referrals, and we have the podcast and the website, and we post blogs, a couple times a month, and we try and get that natural traffic. But we just see a lot more through investors who started off as friends or family, and then they tell their friends, they tell their family, and whoever, and it just expands naturally. But with that, the only thing is the growth is a lot slower than like mass marketing campaigns or whatever, staying in compliance. But it's created like these more fruitful and strong relationships than just having some guy throw 50K into his Vanguard account and they just go do whatever with it.
100%. Yeah, certainly I do and have received referrals. I have friends and family investors, but exactly like you said, we can't control that. I can ask for referrals. I can say, hey, so and so, if you're enjoying your experience with us, I'd certainly appreciate a referral, but I'm not going to push on it. One, but two, I can't decide whether this investor is going to refer me to anybody or whether he or she knows anybody they'd want to refer. There's so many questions that go into it. So I certainly appreciate them. I'm more than happy to ask for and accept referrals. I don't push on it. Again, nobody likes somebody being pushy. So we as business owners, as investors, need to focus on the aspects that we can control, right? What can we drive? And we can ask referrals, we can request them, but we can't drive whether we receive them. So yeah, that's why I focus on putting content out there and being available.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's dive into storage units a little bit. Storage units, I didn't really know very much about them a couple years ago. And I met this mentor through the gym who's in GoBundance, and he actually introduced me to Sterling. So that's how I got this job. And my parents' first investment with Jeff, the debt-free doctor, shout out to Jeff, was a storage unit in Alabama. And so can you just tell us a little bit about like what you look for, why you like them so much, and kind of how you have found that they're a good investment route?
Yeah, Jeff's been on my podcast, so it's interesting to hear about all of these connections. It's so funny how small this space is. I mean, there's so few people in the real estate syndication space when you really get down to it. For me, so there are so many things I like about the self-storage space. I think number one, it starts with kind of that first comment that you made that you hadn't heard about them before, because most people aren't really aware that you can invest in self-storage. Now, once you get into the real estate syndication space, pretty much everybody knows about it. But more broadly, when you talk to the average person about real estate investing, they're going to think about buying a single family property, buying a rental. That's what pretty much everybody's familiar with. They're going to think about flipping, because we've all seen the TV shows where somehow they wind up making money on these
$100,000 every flip they do. Yeah, sure.
Even though it doesn't make any sense and the renovations look terrible.
The numbers aren't adding up. I can tell you that much.
Right. And they might have heard of like these we buy houses cash, businesses, the wholesalers out there, but they don't really know how that works until you get into it. So really the kind of lack of awareness that most people have drew me to self-storage originally, but that wouldn't have been enough to keep me, right? If it's not popular, then there might be a reason it's not popular. Heck, maybe it's not profitable. Maybe there's not opportunity there. But the aspects that really kept me in self-storage came down to, there's a few things to it, right? So it's a fragmented market that is still largely owned by mom and pops, right? So there are a few things that come along with buying a mom and pop self-storage property. Oftentimes those mom and pop investors haven't invested in the latest and greatest technology that would enable them to drive their rents and occupancy. And I mean, that's not, it doesn't even have to be fancy, right? There are software packages that'll manage rent collection and marketing of your units. Many of these mom and pops, heck, they don't even have like a Google Maps entry. And when I think about for myself, if I was going to go rent a storage unit, well, how am I going to find it? I'm going to go on Google Maps on my phone. I'm going to type in self-storage, and I'm going to pick one of the three closest options, probably. A lot of these mom and pops haven't done that because maybe they don't appreciate that that's how folks find self-storage these days. You know, they're kind of used to just having a billboard up and somebody calls in, and that represents a great opportunity to drive rents. And most of the value add opportunities that I see come out of something like that. The current owner hasn't maximized the value because they might not be aware of the options that are available to them, or they're kind of tired, you know, property owners. They don't really want to anymore. They're retired and it's just a cash flow stream for them. And they might be looking to get out of the business. And that is really our opportunity to buy them out at a value that is certainly fair to them, but then invest in the properties and really take them to their full potential by modernizing the operations or adding square footage or whatever makes sense for the property. And that was really what drove me to self-storage, is just how much opportunity is out there in the asset class. And then, of course, through COVID, I'd already been investing in self-storage prior to COVID, but then we saw the eviction moratoriums, which, you know, hit some investors in some areas, and just being able to be exposed to lien law rather than landlord tenant law, I think is a big advantage of self-storage investing as well.
Gotcha. So with the multifamily apartments, like we see a lot of 5 to 10 year holds before, you know, a sell or whatever, and that may come with a year 3 refi. But what are you seeing with the storage units? Are they the 5 to 10 year as well, or are they closer to like a 3 to 5 year hold?
I think it's comparable to multifamily, but it's important to remember that 2020, 2021, and 2022 were pretty abnormal markets, right? Because the Fed reduced the cost of money, essentially interest rates down to basically nothing. And we saw that inflation and everything. But one of the things that drove in the market was an increase in velocity or turnover of ownership. So a lot of folks who are buying properties and selling them a lot faster than the historical norms. So, you know, generally speaking, I think whether it's multifamily or self-storage, moving forward, we're going to see more of a reversion to the mean in terms of hold times, you know, a lot more 5 to 7 year holds as opposed to what we saw for the last few years, which was, you know, 18 to 24 months, even though we thought, hey, we're going to hold this. We underwrote, we're going to hold this for 3 to 5 years, but we have an opportunity because the market has kind of gone crazy to make our return in 18 to 24 months. Well, hey, it's hard to pass that up, right? I certainly took advantage of that when, you know, I had the opportunity, but that's not the normal market condition. And, you know, we need to accept that and be aware of it.
Right, right. Well, what do you have on the horizon? Any specific deals? We don't have to get into too many details, but anything cool coming up for you?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to talk about, you know, deals on the show, but I think, you know, and publicly, that's pretty standard, I think, for the space. But, you know, I still see opportunity in both of these spaces, multifamily and self-storage. You know, certainly there is distress out there right now, and that's not a secret, right? You can find news articles about investors who didn't plan for interest rates to be what they are today, and maybe their interest rate caps expired, so they're having a cash crunch, and that will lead to opportunity for someone, you know, for anyone who's prepared to take advantage of that opportunity. And my goal is to be properly positioned to capitalize on those opportunities. I feel we've adequately protected ourselves from experiencing that downside. If I could address that, but also be sufficiently vague and not to get into anything. There are, again, people that will talk behind closed doors. This is the power of those one-on-one conversations of, you know, learning about who's experiencing distress or seeing where the distress is before the market figures out where the distress is, because by the time the market figures it out, it might be too late to
Jump
capitalize
in
on it. You
there.
might have
Yeah.
missed the wave. So there will be opportunities for sure. If you look on social media or Bigger Pockets or, what have you, I think a lot of people think the Fed is going to start cutting rates really soon. I think it's a little unwise to try to bank on that. It's so far out of our control, and it's just I see that as a formula for overly risky decision making. So I'm certainly not banking on that. It might happen, but we need to be wise and aware of the aspects that are out of our control, and that includes, the direction of interest rates. If that makes sense.
Sure, sure. And I mean, I'm by no means an economist or finance whiz or whatever, but there's been certain articles that I've read and putting them in our newsletter or just taking bits and pieces of them and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're hearing. And none of it has been like, oh, it's coming to drop real quick, real soon. It's always been like, okay, at the end of 2023, expect another, half a point hike or whatever it is. And hopefully that's not the case, but that's what I was reading. That's what I have read. That's what I've still been seeing. So, I mean, Lord knows what's going to happen.
I don't think the Fed really knows. I think the Fed has made good and bad decisions in the past just based on, they make mistakes just like any other entity can. So who knows what's going to happen? Looks like inflation has calmed down, but, we can't see, are we going to plunge into a terrible recession? I doubt it. I don't see that coming, but black swan events can happen, right? I didn't see COVID coming. Who did, other than a couple of senators that made some insider trades and made a lot of money off of that, right? The rest of us
Yeah.
didn't know about it. So we can just position ourselves to be ready for those downswings, when they happen, have reserves in the bank, all the other things that can go along with potential, aiming at protecting your downside, either personally in your personal finances or in any given deal or in your real estate investing business. We can hedge that risk. I think that's a wise thing to do, but also trying not to read the tea leaves too much, because you just are just going to distract yourself and get it wrong
Stuck in
more often
analysis
than
paralysis. Like eventually
exactly
you're going to have to do something.
right.
And the more you look, you're just going to keep waiting for that perfect time to make the jump or do whatever and end up not doing anything just because you're reading the tea leaves too much, like you said.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's jump into our rapid radio round. So the first question here is, what is your favorite book?
So I've been reflecting on this a lot. I've been asked this question quite a few times recently. I'm not even sure why, but probably this one over my shoulder. I'm going to try to point at it. Crucial Conversations. It teaches you tools for dealing with conversations when the stakes are high, is kind of the phrase that they use. And it's a valuable set of skills, of course. Number one, so that's one of the reasons that I love the book. And number two, it came along in my life at a time when I really needed those skills. I'm in my mid 30s now, but I originally read that book when I was in my mid 20s and starting my real estate investing business. And, now I'm married and everything. So a lot of those tools came in handy in my 20s, come in handy today, because we're going to always in life find ourselves in what they call crucial conversations, in conversations where the stakes are high, and having the tools to navigate those conversations can help us avoid so many of the pitfalls that oftentimes boil down to just saying stupid things and, letting our emotions get in the way, that can damage relationships and business situations that are, just unnecessary. Right. So our ability to work with others and influence others, just, again, how to win friends and influence people, ultimately will influence our success in life, not just monetarily and financially, but also I think our general well-being. It's just so when we have strong relationships with others, whether it's, partners like wives or business partners or friends or whatever, that boils down to our ability to have potentially difficult conversations, navigate those situations well and effectively, and come out, comfortably and in a good position on the other side, if that makes sense. So that's why that book is important to me.
Awesome. So Crucial Conversations, do you have the author off the top of your head?
I'm going to pull it off of my shelf here. Not a green screen behind me. There are several authors, Patterson, Grenny, McMillan, and Switzler. It's a red book. You can find it on Amazon. It's not super long. I think it's probably 200 pages, something like that. But yeah, 227. So go check it out. Nice. It's a great book.
Absolutely, will do. And what is your favorite quote?
The obstacle is the way. So that book was written by Ryan Holiday. I'm a fan of his writing and his books, but again, he came out with that book, The Obstacle is the Way, at a time in my life when I was, I think I was in my early 20s at the time. I forget exactly what year it came out, but it was at a time when I was, there was essentially a fork in the road, right? Like, are you going to choose to face tough obstacles? Or are you going to just, let them go and take whatever the easy path is? And I always, whenever an obstacle comes up, I always try to remind myself that the obstacle is the way.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of similar to the road less traveled. And then last question here is, what is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've been training since 2015. I got my purple belt last year in 2022. And, again, I'm in my mid-30s now, so I'm starting to experience some of those mid-30s nagging injuries, but it's a great way to basically force yourself to be present in a situation because you're, submission grappling with your friends, right? So they're beating you up, you're trying to beat them up, and so you better be paying attention to what's happening. It's a great way to rep that skill of being able to be focused, but also to build the skill to push through uncomfortable situations. I think when you put yourself physically in uncomfortable situations, whether it's, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or heck, rock climbing, go rock climbing. I don't like rock climbing because of how uncomfortable it is. But if you can put yourself in those situations and push through, I see personally for me that those skills translate to business situations when you can, either gut it out or have perspective that, hey, this isn't really that bad if I don't let my emotions get in the way, or if I just pay attention to what's happening, I can push my way through. Plus, it's a great way to stay in shape. I got friends, I've got investors and everything. I met my wife at the jiu-jitsu gym. So it's been a great influence on my life generally.
That's awesome. I have never heard a single person say anything negative about BJJ. And I myself would want to do it, but I got two bad shoulders. So I don't think it would be for me, but that's so cool. Love hearing
the injuries are the bad thing. That is the bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where can our listeners find you at, Taylor?
So I host the Passive Wealth Strategy Show. New episodes every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. We'll teach you how to build wealth on Main Street and escape the Wall Street casino. Or if you'd like to learn about potentially investing with us in the future, just go to investwithtaylor.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Taylor, for coming on the show for the second time. This is a great episode. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
This episode was brought to you by Crestworth Capital. If you're a busy professional and ready to make passive income from real estate investing, then go to crestworthcapital.com, where you'll be able to download a free copy of our ebook to help you get started today. Until next week, happy investing.